Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump has been arraigned in federal court for his role in the January 6th Capitol riot. For more, let's bring in CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman joining us now. Rikki, great to see you, and thank you for your contributions here all day as well. I want to ask you about the legal strategy coming from the Trump team. They are trying to argue a free speech, First Amendment right here. What do you make of that theory? I mean, clearly in the indictment, Jack Smith, special counsel, made clear that this is not about free speech.
Well, you have to understand that the defense has to come up with something, and they certainly can make it sound as if it is a viable defense. It may be a viable political defense, but it's not a viable legal defense. And let me give you an easy example, Caitlin. Let's say that I have a conversation with you and I want you to invest in some product I've made. And on that basis of exercising my free speech rights to have a conversation with you, to invest in my product, that's just fine. I can do that. But if it turns out that my product is part of an illegal Ponzi scheme, then what I have done is spoken and gotten you potentially involved in a criminal enterprise. You cannot use free speech as a defense when you are doing something that is committing a crime. It will not work.
This is why I love talking to you, Rikki, because you make everything so much more understandable for all of us following this. Another argument that they're trying to make is try to get this out of D.C. court and into a different kind of venue. What is the actual viability of that? I mean, speaking of a political pitch.
Well, there's no question that any lawyers who would represent Donald Trump, who know that 95% of the population voted against him in the last election. So you would believe that the jury pool would not be in your favor. So you would move for a change of venue. You're going to move also to dismiss for prejudicial pretrial publicity. But you can always, with the use of appropriate tools, if you are a good judge, find jurors who will be able to sit, and it will not be necessary to move it out of D.C., let alone to West Virginia, which is, of course, a red state. So what we have here is a system. A judge can find that both sides can participate in a questionnaire that is suggesting questions that should be sent out to hundreds of jurors. And then those jurors can be weeded out until we can get a group of jurors who can be brought in. And when those jurors are brought in, they can be questioned. And a jury does not have to know nothing. A jury does not have to be ignorant. A jury could have read all about January 6th, could have watched the actions of January 6th, could have followed the entire process from December or November through December into January of 2021. But if that juror can raise his or her hand and say that I know I have had all of this information, but I can discard all of that, and I can be fair and impartial and decide the case on the evidence presented and only that, that juror can be sworn in. We have had infamous cases before, celebrity cases, well-known people who have been put on trial, people who have been the subject of movies at the same time that they're put on trial. And at the same time, we've been able to impanel juries. Best example I can give you here is it was said that all the people of Boston were victim of the Boston Marathon, and yet a jury was sworn. Albeit that was taken up on appeal, it was sent back, but eventually we wind up with a situation where you can have fair and impartial jurors. So, Caitlin, no, a change of venue motion won't work, but yes, it should be filed.
And Rikki, there are other potential indictments to come potentially this month in Georgia. I know you have described kind of the importance of this particular investigation into January 6th as, Americans being the victims here. So this is kind of should take priority. But I'm curious kind of how this may play into that Georgia investigation to just kind of put all of these probes into context for us.
Well, it may be one thing that I might want to see this particular case go first, but I am not Jack Smith, and I, of course, am not this judge, and it may not go first. But what we have to remember about the Georgia case, should it result in an indictment, which is anticipated, but certainly has not been filed yet, the Georgia case, if it is in fact a criminal case, is a sister case to the January 6th indictment, because the prosecutor, Fani Willis, has made public statements that the Georgia case will be far more broad than just what might have happened in terms of allegations of election interference in Georgia, but that she is looking to go far and wide and use what she has used before, which is what we call a RICO indictment, which is a racketeer influenced corrupt organization indictment. We usually save those types of indictments to use against the mob and other corrupt organizations. But what she wants to do is have a grand jury return an indictment against Donald Trump and his colleagues as a RICO indictment, not only about election interference in Georgia, but election interference throughout the country. So it may mirror the January 6th indictment. Keep in mind this factor that many of us forget when we talk about the January 6th indictment, wanting it to go first. A federal indictment, whether it's this one in D.C. about January 6th, as we call it, or the one in Florida about the documents and obstruction of justice allegations about Mar-a-Lago, those are federal indictments. If Donald Trump is elected president in 2024, he can either stop those cases or he possibly, it has never been decided, he possibly, even if convicted, could pardon himself. But when it comes to state crimes like Georgia or the indictment in New York, Donald Trump, even if he were elected president, has no power to pardon himself, if he has that power at all, but certainly cannot do it with a state indictment. So there may also be an argument that if the Georgia indictment is as sweeping as I just described it, based on statements from the prosecutor, Fani Willis, then perhaps the Georgia indictment should go first.
That's a really interesting distinction, an important reminder that there are federal and state cases going on, and Donald Trump still is the front runner for the Republican nomination, so maybe in that position. Rikki Klieman, thank you so much. As always, great to see you. We appreciate your time.